Last year, somebody asked me this at a cookout. Paper plate in one hand, standing next to the cooler. And he says, "Is now a good time to buy?" You might think I would have said, absolutely. The best time to buy real estate is typically 5 years ago, but the next best time is always today. But I didn't. The sooner you can get into a home, the sooner you can experience all the benefits of home ownership. But for this particular person, now wasn't the right time. Here are some of the benefits that I suggested he delayed receiving. 1. Forced savings. Every payment moves money from your cash flow into an asset that you own. 2. Leverage. You put down a fraction and control the entire asset. If a $300,000 house appreciates just 3%, that's $9,000. But if you only put $30,000 down, you've earned 30% on your actual cash before costs, which is exactly why this next part matters. 3. A housing payment that stops rising. Your principal and interest are fixed for 30 years, while rents keep climbing. 4. Tax treatment you can't get anywhere else. The Section 121 exclusion lets you take $250,000 of gain tax-free when you file single, $500,000 if married. There is almost nothing else in the tax code that generous for ordinary people like us. And it's the reason long-tenured homeowners often have more usable equity than they realize. 5. And then there's the part that isn't on the spreadsheet. You plant something that won't look like much for 10 years. You mark your kid's height on the door frame. Nobody's going to make you paint over it. You decide the kitchen is the wrong color, and you just change it without asking. Despite all this, I told him to wait. He didn't buy for another 11 months, and it was the right call for his unique circumstances. I'm Jeff Jolicoeur with the Surette Real Estate Team here at EXP in Central Maine. 25 years of doing this, and before that, I taught 4th grade, which mostly means when somebody asks me a question, my instinct is to explain how the thing actually works instead of just handing them an answer. So this is the Ask Jeff playlist. You ask, I answer, and I'm going to answer honestly, even when honesty isn't good for business. Let's get back to the cookout. Is now a good time to buy? Let me tell you why I almost never answer it directly. Here's what's hiding inside that question. It assumes there's a right answer that's true for everybody at the same time. Like there's a light somewhere that's either green or red. And if you could just find out which, you'd know what to do. That light doesn't exist. Because now isn't one thing. Now for a 30-year-old with a stable job who plans to raise a family in that house for 20 years is a completely different now than it is for somebody who might get transferred in 18 months. Same market, same day, same interest rate, opposite answers. So when somebody asks me if it's a good time, what I'm actually hearing is, tell me whether I'm about to make a mistake. And I can't answer that without knowing anything about them. Here's the question that actually works. How long am I going to own this house? That's it. The single question resolves more than anything you'll read about rates, inventory, or forecasts. Because buying a house has fixed costs on both ends. You pay to get in. Closing costs, inspections, moving, all the money that leaves your pocket in the first year for things you didn't know you needed. And you pay to get out. Commission, transfer tax, prepping, and the carrying costs of the months it takes to sell. Those costs don't care what the market did. They are there regardless. So if you're going to own it for a long time, you have a long time for appreciation and principal pay down to swamp those costs. The market's mood on that day you bought becomes trivial. If you're going to own it for 2 or 3 years, those costs are enormous relative to everything else. And you are genuinely making a bet. Making a fine bet. Maybe a fine bet, but a bet. That guy at the cookout, he wasn't certain where he wanted to settle. And if there was a real chance he'd move again quickly, buying would have worked against him. But that wasn't the only reason I suggested he wait. Second question, can you comfortably afford the payment you would have today? Not the payment you'd have if interest rates drop. Not the payment you're hoping to refinance into. The one on the paper in the month you close. I've watched people stretch into a payment on the strength of a refinance that was supposedly coming. But I want to be blunt about this. Nobody knows. Not me, not your lender, not anybody on television. If the plan requires rates to move a specific direction by a specific time, that isn't a plan. That's a wish with a mortgage attached. Now, if you can carry today's payment comfortably and rates fall later, wonderful, refinance. That's free upside. But the deal has to work on the day you sign it, every single time. That guy at the cookout, Money would have been tight. He expected a raise in 6 months, but no one had promised him one. Third question, and this is where Central Maine stops looking like the rest of the country. Is the kind of house you want actually scarce here? Kennebec County isn't one market. In a county this size, it's a dozen small markets that behave independently. There could be plenty of one type of house sitting around while another type gets 3 offers in a weekend. Single-level homes with a garage, houses in one particular school district, anything in genuinely move-in condition under a certain price. These can be scarce even in a month when the overall numbers look sleepy. That guy at the cookout, option and his price range were limited at that time, and I had a hunch spring would loosen that up. I want to spend a minute here because it matters more than people realize. When you read a national housing headline, you are reading an average built from millions of transactions across every kind of market in the country. Phoenix and Portland and rural Kansas, all in one number. Kennebec County is relatively small. In a given month, a single town might have a handful of closed sales of a particular type. That is not enough transactions for a national trend to describe. It's barely enough for a local trend to describe. So when the news says prices fell 2%, that tells you almost nothing about whether the house you're looking at in Winslow is priced right. This isn't me telling you to ignore the news. It's me telling you that the news is answering a different question than the one you're asking. And here's my honest answer. And it's less satisfying than a forecast. It's a good time when you're going to be there long enough for the transaction costs to stop mattering. When you can carry the payment you'd actually have without squeezing. When you've got reserves after closing, because something in that house is going to break in year 1, and it's always more than you budgeted for. And when the house you want is one you'd be content in, even if it's valued to nothing for 5 years, hit those and the market conditions on your particular Tuesday are no longer relevant. Miss them, and no interest rate is going to save you. The guy at the cookout came back to me the following spring. Some money saved, increased purchasing power with the raise, and we found him something that fit his budget and his lifestyle in about 3 weeks. And what I want you to notice is that it wasn't just about the market that made it the right time. His financial position had improved. His commitment to the area had increased, as did the inventory. Waiting isn't always the right choice, but for some people, it might be. If you're wondering whether now is your moment, I'm happy to walk through those questions with you. And if the answer is wait, I'll tell you to wait. That's not me being noble. It's that I'd rather have you as a client in a year than in a bad transaction today. Call or text me at 207-649-6893 or find me at surette-realestate.com. And if you got a question you want answered on this playlist, leave it in the comments. I'll be sure to answer. If a move is on your horizon and you want the logistics mapped out ahead of time, the Downsizers Moving Checklist is in the link below. Free and useful, even if you're not downsizing.